Senator John Kennedy showed why discipline beats pedigree, while Hillary Clinton showed how quickly a resume becomes a shield for arrogance. The hearing concerned accountability in federal records management, a subject Clinton treated as permission to dismiss scrutiny as an insult. She entered with decades of titles, the confidence of someone accustomed to controlling the frame before questions landed. Kennedy needed no theatrical outrage because his method was simpler. Wait, listen, and make the witness answer. Clinton instead attacked his manner, clothes, and persona before addressing the subject in front of her. "Before you begin your carnival Barker routine in that seersucker suit," Clinton said, offering contempt where an argument should have been. It was not about records, responsibility, or evidence. It was a swipe designed to diminish Kennedy before he established the examination. Kennedy did not flinch, interrupt, or reward the performance with the emotional reaction Clinton expected. He leaned back, cleaned his glasses, and allowed the insult to remain for everyone to see who had abandoned substance first. That pause hurt because Clinton expected noise, but Kennedy understood that silence exposes condescension more than anger. Then, Kennedy answered with the calm precision of a man who recognized the opening Clinton had handed him. "Honey, I appreciate that. And you're right. You do have the most impressive resume of anyone who has ever lost a presidential election." Kennedy did more than return an insult. He redirected the hearing from Clinton's opinion of him to Clinton's record of pursuing power and failing to secure the office she wanted most. The response worked because Clinton's resume was long, prestigious, and presented as proof of inevitability. Kennedy acknowledged those positions because denying them would have weakened the point he was constructing. Hillary Clinton had been First Lady, Senator, Secretary of State, and a two-time presidential candidate, collecting credentials Washington treats as insulation from ordinary judgment. Each title increased the weight of the final fact, because experience should sharpen judgment, not produce a catalog of excuses after voters say no. Kennedy was not mocking public service. He was exposing the vanity of using a resume as a substitute for accountability. "The job you actually wanted," Kennedy said, bringing the list to the destination Clinton could not bury beneath ceremony or status. He let the smile sit because no decoration was needed, and Clinton now faced the weakness in her own opening attack. She had called Kennedy a performer, yet he focused on outcomes while she tried to make clothing and personality the issue. He made the roles unmistakable. "I'm not a carnival barker." Then, Kennedy fixed the frame Clinton had tried to escape. "You are the witness." That distinction cut through Clinton's fog, because witnesses cannot replace examination with branding, simply because the questions are uncomfortable. Clinton had positioned herself above Kennedy, above the hearing, and above any duty to explain facts that challenged her preferred narrative. Kennedy rejected that arrangement, and, rather than expanding the insult match, reached for Clinton's own explanation of her defeat. He brought out what happened, not as a prop, but as Clinton's chosen account of the 2016 presidential election. Kennedy said he had read it twice, preventing the claim that he was attacking a book he had never understood. Twice mattered because Kennedy was not dismissing Clinton's argument. He had studied the case she built for herself. He needed no invented motive when Clinton had placed her explanations into print under her own name. Kennedy counted 24 reasons in the book for why she lost. 24 exits from the simplest possibility of personal responsibility. 24 reasons in this book, he said, reducing hundreds of pages of reputation management to a number the room could understand. The count was brutal because it converted Clinton's sprawling defense into an inventory of blame, and inventories are harder to romanticize than memoirs. Then, Kennedy identified the omission that made those explanations resemble an organized escape from accountability. 24 reasons, and not one of them was "I didn't campaign in Wisconsin." Clinton could blame rivals, institutions, messaging, or circumstances, but Kennedy isolated the decision her own list would not confront. The missing Wisconsin admission was only the first crack in Clinton's record, because the next evidence would move beyond campaign judgment and into documents she could not explain away with another chapter. What looked like an exchange over a memoir was about to become darker. A private server, thousands of deleted emails, and the machinery used to make federal records disappear. Kennedy moved from Clinton's missing Wisconsin admission to records she could not rename, because poor campaigning was one thing, but a private email server was something darker. Hillary Clinton had served as Secretary of State, yet she conducted official business through a system maintained for personal use. This was not a junior staffer losing one document. It was a senior official placing government communications beyond ordinary federal channels, under the rules she enforced. Kennedy needed no exaggeration, because the decision itself supplied the indictment. Clinton's defenders reduced the scandal to a technical disagreement about email habits, as though the issue were an outdated phone or an inconvenient password. Technical fog was useful because it made ordinary Americans seem incapable of understanding the controversy. Kennedy restored the simple sequence without relying on technical jargon. Clinton used the server, investigators sought records, and thousands of messages disappeared before public examination. The issue was never her mastery of computer equipment. It was whether an official could decide which parts of her record survived and still call that transparency. The number was 33,000, far too large to dismiss as several personal notes accidentally swept into routine cleanup. Clinton's team labeled those emails personal, deleted them, and asked the country to trust the same operation being examined, with no independent public referee. It resembled allowing a defendant to sort evidence, destroy whatever appeared inconvenient, then assure the jury that nothing relevant was missing. Clinton insisted the material concerned private matters, but the public could not independently test that claim. For a politician already surrounded by explanations, demanding more trust looked like another exemption reserved for power. Then came BleachBit, the deletion software that made the cleanup appear more calculated than Clinton's allies wanted to admit. This was not simply moving unwanted messages into a recycle bin. The process was designed to obstruct recovery, turning an argument about convenience into a question about why permanent destruction was necessary, long before questions were resolved. Each additional step weakened Clinton's innocent portrait, because harmless housekeeping rarely requires tools meant to prevent reconstruction. Kennedy remained controlled while her explanations multiplied, allowing the method of erasure to speak louder than his anger ever could. The FBI investigation should have resolved the matter, but instead it produced exactly the kind of Washington outcome that deepens public suspicion. Investigators examined the server, classified information, and deleted messages, then described serious conduct without recommending prosecution. Clinton's allies declared vindication, while critics heard findings that could have ended an ordinary government employee's career under the same internal standards. That gap between condemnation and consequence was central to Kennedy's case. Rules looked rigid when applied downward, then strangely flexible around officials protected by titles, attorneys, donors, and institutional loyalty. Clinton's explanation converted the absence of charges into supposed proof that her choices had been responsible. Those claims were not identical, and Kennedy refused to let them merge into one slogan. A prosecutorial decision addressed whether authorities would bring a case. It did not erase the server, restore deleted messages, or turn reckless judgment into stewardship. Clinton wanted institutional restraint, treated as moral clearance for every government employee involved. Kennedy kept returning to responsibility, because public trust collapses when officials celebrate anything short of indictment as honorable conduct. The contradiction was worse because Clinton had spent years presenting herself as the experienced adult in every room, uniquely prepared for national power. Experience was her credential, competence her brand, and government mastery her answer to every challenge, as her central political defense. Yet the scandal required Americans to believe this exceptionally prepared official built an improper communications arrangement without understanding its obvious consequences. If Clinton understood the system, her choice looked deliberate. If she did not, her competence argument collapsed. Kennedy left her trapped between those alternatives, using only the record already before the country. That was why Clinton's carnival barker insult now looked pitiful. She made Kennedy's style the controversy because he made her pattern the evidence. First came Wisconsin, then 24 excuses, the private server, 33,000 deleted emails, BleachBit, and an FBI inquiry whose grave findings produced no comparable punishment. The pattern converted accountability into procedure, procedure into ambiguity, and ambiguity into escape under the banner of accountability. But the server was only one chamber in a larger machine, and the next carried the names Perkins Coie and Fusion GPS. The evidence ahead would connect opposition research, the Steele dossier, and a surveillance process Clinton's defenders desperately needed the public to examine separately. Kennedy then moved from deleted emails to machinery that shaped national politics and media institutions while posing as independent intelligence. The names Perkins Coie and Fusion GPS exposed the financial pathway behind the Steele dossier. Hillary Clinton's campaign did not simply benefit from allegations about Donald Trump after they entered national headlines. Through its law firm, campaign money helped fund the opposition research behind those allegations. Kennedy's method remained devastatingly simple. Follow the payments before accepting the manufactured narrative around it. Perkins Coie stood between Clinton's campaign and Fusion GPS, providing distance useful for public denial and legal insulation. That arrangement let Clinton's operation describe the dossier as outside research while obscuring direct sponsorship. Fusion GPS retained former British intelligence officer Christopher Steele, whose intelligence background gave unverified claims an authoritative surface. Prestige became camouflage, just as Clinton's resume had become camouflage earlier in the hearing. Washington accepted impressive packaging where verified evidence should have been required. The Clinton campaign and Democratic National Committee later faced consequences for obscuring the research's financing from public view. Their disclosures characterized payments to Perkins Coie as legal services, not opposition research supporting the dossier. That was not harmless bookkeeping, because voters deserved to know who financed election-shaping accusations. Clinton's defenders demanded transparency from every opponent and critic, while her operation relied on carefully drafted distance. Kennedy needed no invented hypocrisy. The documented money trail supplied it. The dossier then traveled beyond campaign warfare and entered the federal surveillance process. Politically financed allegations appeared in repeated applications seeking authority to monitor Carter Page under secret surveillance. Partisan research was not automatically false, but its origins and verification failures required honest disclosure. The Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court did not receive the complete picture Americans were later promised. The Inspector General eventually identified serious errors and omissions throughout the applications. Those failures mattered because FISA proceedings occur secretly, without opposing counsel present, challenging the government. Such extraordinary surveillance power demands extraordinary accuracy, candor, and discipline from requesting officials. Instead, applications contained unsupported statements, omitted information, and evidence that should have invited deep skepticism. Clinton could not personally own every investigative failure, but she could not erase the dossier's financing. Her campaign helped purchase the match. Then, Washington acted surprised when smoke reached federal institutions. Kennedy did not claim every rumor originated in one office, or every official obeyed Clinton. His point required no conspiracy fantasy. Political money produced research that acquired governmental weight. Clinton's allies separated each stage, preventing Americans from seeing the continuous chain. Kennedy reconnected those stages, showing how influence becomes respectable after passing through layers of political and media intermediaries. In Washington, laundering credibility can prove more politically valuable than laundering cash. Kennedy then shifted to Haiti, where Clinton's service claims met another trail of money and access. After the devastating earthquake, international donors promised reconstruction while Haitians waited for housing, medical care, and jobs. Billions moved under relief language, yet visible results invited questions ceremonial speeches could not answer. The Clinton network occupied an influential position within that reconstruction environment. Kennedy treated Haiti not as a charitable slogan, but as an audit of who benefited. Caracol Industrial Park was promoted as economic renewal, promising employment far from the earthquake's center. Supporters advertised thousands of jobs, but results fell short of the public expectations justifying the project. Families lost agricultural land, while leaders celebrated a model supposedly created for Haitian prosperity. Kennedy exposed Washington's habit of measuring compassion by money announced, rather than outcomes delivered. Clinton's brand looked polished at conferences, but Haitians lived between promise and performance. The Royal Oasis Project raised further questions about priorities within Haiti's reconstruction economy. While families faced ruins and uncertainty, luxury development attracted capital and influential visitors. That contrast was poisonous because relief had been marketed around Haiti's most vulnerable citizens. Then, the designation FOBWJCVIP appeared, identifying friends of Bill Clinton and especially important persons. Such labels suggested elite access was organized with an efficiency missing from aid delivery. Kennedy now confronted a system where proximity could matter more than need, and branding more than results. Clinton could mock his suit, but sarcasm could not explain organized access amid prolonged Haitian suffering. Deleted emails showed records disappearing. The dossier showed financing disguised. Haiti exposed influence beneath humanitarian language. Yet Kennedy approached a failure measured not in missing messages, disclosures, or abandoned projects. The next record began in Benghazi, lasted 13 hours, and ended with 4 Americans dead, while Clinton's most infamous answer echoed through Washington. Kennedy approached Benghazi without the smugness Clinton brought, because 4 dead Americans deserved discipline, not another exercise in reputation management. On September 11, 2012, attacks struck facilities in Benghazi, Libya, and the crisis unfolded across 13 hours. Ambassador Christopher Stevens, Sean Smith, Tyrone Woods, and Glenn Doherty never came home. Their deaths transformed every question about Clinton's judgment from political argument into a test of command responsibility. Clinton's polished resume now faced a record no title could soften. Clinton had served as Secretary of State, the senior official whose department carried responsibility for American diplomatic operations abroad. Benghazi, therefore, could not be dismissed as a campaign inconvenience, a hostile headline, or another chapter written by resentful opponents. Security concerns had existed before the attack, and the aftermath generated years of investigations, testimony, and bitter institutional defense. Kennedy did not need to pretend Clinton personally controlled every tactical decision made that night. He needed only to ask why leadership demanded credit in ceremonial moments, but scattered responsibility when consequences became unbearable. That question exposed the central fraud of Clinton's political brand. Authority was always personal when success could be claimed, yet strangely abstract when failure required an owner. Her defenders divided Benghazi into cables, agencies, timelines, committees, and procedural disputes until accountability became almost impossible to locate. Every fragment could be debated separately, allowing the complete institutional failure to dissolve beneath technical language. Kennedy restored the human scale by returning to 4 names, 13 hours, and a government that did not protect its people. Numbers did what Clinton's practiced explanations could not. They forced the room to remember the cost. Then came the sentence that permanently attached itself to Clinton's Benghazi testimony. What difference at this point does it make? Clinton's defenders argued that the remark concerned the attack's precise origin and the explanations offered afterward. But political language is judged not only by the defense prepared, but by what it reveals when pressure strips away polish. To families and citizens demanding clarity, the sentence sounded less like precision than exhausted contempt for the distinction they wanted examined. Kennedy understood why it endured. It compressed Clinton's impatience with scrutiny into 8 words Americans could never forget. Kennedy's advantage throughout the hearing was his refusal to let Clinton define accountability as partisan persecution. He connected her insult, election excuses, private server, deleted emails, dossier financing, Haiti record, and Benghazi response through one consistent standard. The standard was not whether Clinton had accumulated prestigious jobs, loyal defenders, or enough legal distance from an adverse consequence. It was whether someone entrusted with power could identify a failure and say plainly, without euphemism, that the failure belonged to her judgment. Again and again, Clinton offered complexity where responsibility should have stood. Kennedy finally returned to the ordinary wisdom Washington professionals routinely underestimate, using the fishing story about Boudreaux to reduce Clinton's entire defensive structure to common sense. A fisherman can blame the weather, the water, the boat, the current, the equipment, or every invisible force surrounding an empty hook. Those explanations may sound sophisticated, especially when repeated by experts who benefit from keeping the fisherman blameless. But if the fish repeatedly refuse to bite, the practical man eventually examines what he personally placed on the line. That was Kennedy's answer to Clinton's 24 reasons, institutional fog, and endless circle of convenient culprits. My bait was bad carried more honesty than Clinton's entire architecture of blame, because it identified the one variable she consistently protected from examination. Kennedy was not claiming that campaigns, agencies, foreign attackers, media organizations, or political rivals never influence outcomes. He was demonstrating that leadership becomes meaningless when the leader claims every advantage yet owns no decisive mistake. The fishing comparison worked because ordinary Americans recognize the difference between explaining conditions and avoiding responsibility. Clinton kept describing the water, while Kennedy kept pointing to the bait. Change the bait was not merely a punchline. It was the judgment Clinton's defenders had spent years refusing to deliver. Kennedy had praised her resume, only to prove that credentials without accountability become an elaborate shield against learning. The hearing ended where Clinton's memoir should have begun, with the possibility that the recurring problem was neither Wisconsin, Russia, the press, the FBI, nor anyone else available for blame. Kennedy won because he demanded ownership in language no institution could bury beneath procedure. Clinton arrived prepared to ridicule a senator, but left exposed by the simplest rule of public life.